Hi there, and welcome to the Main Idea podcast. I'm Jen David Lang, and my passion is helping school leaders learn. I read lots of education and leadership books, and I save you time with your professional learning by choosing only the most impactful and compelling books to share with you. Today, I am excited to get to speak with author Berit Gordon again. I featured her previous book, The Joyful Teacher, in the Main Idea about 2 years ago, I believe. It's not a fluffy book about joy, although I think joy is anything but fluffy. Rather, it's a practical book with ideas to increase student engagement and teacher effectiveness at the same time. So, a little background. Berit Gordon was a teacher for about a quarter of a century, still is teaching at community college, still teaching new teachers all the time. So, she is in the trenches and understanding what it is like to continue to teach. But now she's really devoted to supporting other teachers so that they thrive in the classroom. So we are going to be discussing her latest book, The New Teacher Handbook. I am so excited to have you. Welcome, Berit.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Glad you are here. Thanks for taking the time. So why am I sharing a book for new teachers with an audience of educational leaders, you may ask? Well, first of all, we were losing our new teachers in a recent chapter that I put together with Kim Marshall about supporting new teachers. We cited a statistic that between 20 and 40% of new teachers leave within the first 5 years. 20 to 40%. That's a lot, right? One fifth, two fifths for my math people out there. So I hate to say it, but a big reason why new teachers leave is often us. It's often the leaders who aren't as supportive as they could be. So there really is a lot that we can do. So back to the new teacher handbook, I thought if we want our new teachers to stay, then it helps for us as leaders to know what are the skills and what are the strategies new teachers most need, and also to have a resource at our fingertips to share with new teachers themselves, with coaches, with anyone who's working with new teachers. So that's my reason for sharing this book with leaders. But can you share more about why you wrote this book? What problem is it solving? And why should leaders be interested?
So I wrote this book, even though I'm still part-time teaching. I do a lot of consulting in districts across the US, and it was to answer a pain point that I hear from two groups. One is new teachers, and one are the administrators. The other is administrators trying to help those new teachers. And, new teachers we know are often flailing. They come in with all these big hopes and ambitions, and then the gap between what they're trying to have happen in their classroom and what's actually happening can be very vast, and that's defeating. And then, of course, administrators are wanting to support them and wanting to help them, but our bandwidth is only so great. And, administrators have incredibly complex jobs. And so it's not just the hiring and the onboarding, it's how do I help those new teachers get good habits in place?
Yeah.
Because they know it's so much harder to undo bad habits once they're already going.
Yeah.
But we need resources. And, so first and foremost, it's for new teachers. It's the book I wish I had had. Um,
They say that's always the best book to write, the book you wish you had.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And, I look back, it's sort of embarrassing. I'm paid well to go into districts and coach teachers on things like how to get to a well-managed classroom and how to boost student independence. And meanwhile, when I think back to my first year teaching, I want to go back to those students and ask them, are you okay? Because it
Yeah.
was not pretty. And what happens as a new teacher, and I had decent training and support, but what happens is that when the wheels are kind of coming off the bus, and I didn't always know how to get good answers. And so for instance, I had a rock star teacher down the hall who taught the same thing I did.
Yeah.
And now I have the skills. I would go to her and I'd say, Danielle, oh my gosh, let me sit in your classroom, break this down for me. How are you getting your kids to do that? Because mine are not.
Yeah.
And instead, I was embarrassed. I didn't want to admit that I was flailing. And so she used to stay late and do all her planning for the next day.
Yeah.
And then she would leave her agenda on the board.
Yeah.
And I would wait her out.
Yeah.
I would go down to her room. I would copy everything she had on her board and I would put
Exactly.
it on my board. And of course, it didn't work.
Yeah.
And I would get advice like, I knew I was getting a really tough group of students with high needs, and people told me, you've got to show them you mean business, and you've got to, use your teacher voice. And I was nervous because I'm like, I'm not a yeller. And
Yeah.
of course, I now know yelling really doesn't work
Yeah.
either. So then I kept going and I got a different answer I wanted to hear, which was, no, you don't need to yell.
Yeah.
Just wait them out. Don't talk over them. Just wait until they're listening.
Yeah.
And so I had this group come in and they were talking, talking, talking. And I waited and I waited and they kept talking. And then the bell rang and they left. So not great advice. And again, I say this with like, I'm
Right.
kind of embarrassed because I'm
Right.
considered now a bit of an expert. And
Right.
lo and behold, I was flailing and I see new teachers doing this where they're getting support. A lot of administrators are putting in lots of measures. They're getting the coaching, but it's only, we also need places for them to get reliable answers
Yeah.
because they're still talking in the staff room. They're going on TikTok and they're
Oh,
educating
teachers
their.
pay teachers, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I have nothing. I love TikTok. I love
Yeah.
AI. I get great help with those resources,
Yeah.
but it's not all vetted. It's not all research backed.
Yeah.
My husband was an alternate route teacher and he was struggling a lot with management and he was told call home. He spent hours calling home and he had parents who basically said, you're the teacher, you figure it out,
Yeah.
understandably,
Yeah.
or who didn't answer or
Yeah.
who said, yeah, I have that same problem with my kid, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
And meanwhile trust with his students just eroded.
Yeah.
And it was so hard, even that he got good answers later, it was so hard to undo that.
Yeah.
My daughter was a brand new teacher last year, and God forbid she asked her mother for help. So when the kids were listening to her, she looked up and, she was told, try these. It was like a token economic system.
Mhm.
It was like one step above a behavior chart. And she put so much time into like paying bucks for good. I mean, she spent half her salary on Jolly Ranchers and
Yeah.
it didn't really work. And so, how do we give teachers answers? Because my fear and what I know administrators want to be able to offer are reliable answers that
Yeah.
teachers are willing to listen to. Because so that they don't go get those bad answers. Because what happens is I see them try things that maybe aren't really student centered
Yes.
and it doesn't always work. And then what happens is if they try something and it doesn't work, and they try something else and it doesn't work, they don't necessarily keep trying. Eventually, they get out of problem solving mode
Yeah.
and they tend to blame other things. Like they start blaming kids,
Yeah.
or they blame caregivers, or they blame administrators.
Yeah.
And then we've got that fissure where they're not really listening to us anymore.
Yeah.
And so the resource also, I mean, I mostly work with administrators. They're my first contact when I get to work in a school.
Yeah.
It's not a teacher who calls me up, it's a
No.
principal who says,
Yeah.
we really need help getting to routines and well-managed classrooms. And they need things that teachers are going to hear, they're going to try, and then it's going to feel like my friend and I used to call it, we'd get to, and I taught today day. The day where you tried something, you're like, oh, I actually taught. Those days feel so good,
Yes.
energizing. And I didn't feel there's so many phenomenal resources out there. And Jen, you share these all the time.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love that you do, and the main idea is the way that you give these synopses.
Mm.
Because I mean, I have 20 books on my bookshelf. I'm great at buying them. I'm not great at always reading them.
Yeah.
So, and so part of what I wanted to do for administrators was to give them really short, practical strategies. This book is not a cover to cover read.
No.
So they can send teachers, they can give them ways to get consistent best practices.
Yes.
Because that's the other thing is that, I think administrators, one of their pain points is they have some teachers who are really thriving,
Yeah.
but then others are kind of making it up and they're trying different things.
Yeah.
And then they're dealing with, say, parents calling, like, no one wants that one third grade teacher
Yeah.
because they are a maverick. They tried their own thing and they
Yeah.
got some of those
Yeah.
habits in place.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to give them a book that very short, very practical, but also very current.
Yep.
We need a book out there that addresses 2025 issues of things like cell phones and, increased caregiver expectations
Yep.
and a lot of online curricula that can be really hard for new teachers to navigate. A lot more assessments, even like social emotional lives of students, emotional regulation. That term wasn't even around when I started
Right.
teaching, and
Of
it's
course not.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Neurodiversity, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, and then that, so the book also is giving administrators strategies for our world, what their new teachers are struggling with. And then it gives them methods like every strategy has a video
Yeah.
because the new teachers I'm working with, they're not reading a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. There's great content out there and videos. So every strategy, I like to think of it, it's like the book is sort of the recipes, it's like the cookbook,
Hmm.
but then you also have the cooking show,
Yeah.
right? The
Or
videos.
more likely the TikTok of the recipes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. So you sort of have both. So
Yeah.
every strategy either has kind of a TikTok video of me
Right.
just explaining it, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you don't have time to read, listen to me talk about it on your lunch break. A coach could like send a video to a teacher, an administrator could play that video of here's something to try. Like you feel like you're
Yeah.
exhausted, giving reminders and repeating yourself. Here's something to try. Or it's the cooking show of show me what it looks like.
Yes.
So, for instance, I know something we're all telling new teachers, and I myself am totally guilty of in the classroom. We talk too much,
Yeah.
right? We hold, but new teachers especially tend to keep kids with them
Yes.
because it is terrifying to just like
To let
send.
go of the reins.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, right. Oh God, like it's going to be chaos and
Right.
let me keep control and I'm going to hold them all here. And then, of course, we're dealing with so many management issues because kids can't pay attention. They're so bored, right?
Yeah.
So we tell them, keep your instructions short and sweet.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're like, how do I, but my lesson plan has all this stuff and I
Right.
got to cover all of
How
this.
do I do it? Yeah.
What does it look like? And so, that's an example of
Yeah.
watch me as I do this with a classroom of students, and I keep my instruction really lean. And then you also get a narration over it. Like, notice in my 10-minute lesson that I have one teaching point.
Yeah.
I'm only teaching one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Notice that I have students quickly try something,
Yeah.
and instead of calling on them, which is a time suck and they get off task,
Yeah.
I recap what they said.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I recap what I wish they said, right? Because I'm keeping the pace going. Because
Yeah.
so often, management issues are like pacing issues. We
Yeah.
just need to tighten our pacing.
Yeah.
So they see that video of me doing it. And then the other thing I would say, I really wanted to support administrators and coaches because every administrator I know, they would love to not have a new teacher problem. I would love for them to not need this book because they have almost no turnover. I mean, that
Hmm.
would be beautiful
Yes.
because as much as I love new teachers and they bring tremendous passion and care, I got to be honest, you get good at teaching by sticking around,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And honing your craft. And so there's always a way for them to support new teachers. Every strategy has a coach admin support section. So what does it look like to actually help a new teacher try this on?
Hmm.
Sometimes it's side by side coaching. Sometimes which is great too if you
Hmm.
have coaches.
Sure.
I work with a lot of coaches. I myself was a coach. And you get to be a coach because you were good in the classroom. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I know how to work with adults. And so sometimes I need a little tip of like, okay, I know the strategy, like I know it, but how do I get a new teacher to open up to it? How do I get them to try it on with me? So it's side by side coaching. Sometimes it's how to just model it in
Yeah.
your own work.
Yeah.
So they can, administrators can think, how am I doing this in my work with
Yeah.
teachers?
Hmm.
And even say why, for instance, I don't know, why do you start a staff meeting right on time?
Hmm.
Well, it's because I think this helps in your classroom,
Yeah.
to start at the start and keep the pacing tight.
Yeah.
Um, I was just telling an administrator recently, there's a strategy in there for the first days about how to do intro activities that are get to know each other.
Hmm.
But very few of them. none of them are like, say a funny fact about yourself. And I
Right.
know from PD, because teachers are like, please, no icebreakers. Oh my
Right.
God, they hate icebreakers. So, there are ways in that a strategy for a coach or administrator to do get to know each other with teachers that honors that perhaps introverted side of them.
Yeah. Well, let me pause here. Let me pause here. And to sum up, so what this is, it's kind of like the main idea for teaching. So you have pulled together from all of your research, resources, and own experience, sort of the 10 areas we're going to get into that new teachers should learn how to master. And the book is it's a handbook. It's not a read straight through it.
No.
So I want to say, first of all, so the 10 areas that you picked are things, of course, like classroom management and behavior and building student relationships and increasing student independence and planning and assessment. So you have the topics that are not surprising. And then I love that these 10 topics I also saw described as milestones, like 10 milestones that teachers should strive for, right? It's very concrete. And you have great videos. I've watched them and I think they're very useful because, yes, we are becoming a society of people who get information by watching, which is fine. And and then for each of these 10 milestones, I really like that you have a checklist. So let's say I'm a new teacher or I'm working with a new teacher, I'm a coach or a principal. You can go to a chapter and there's actually a checklist and to see if you can check off the majority of these items, okay, don't do that chapter. Like let's focus on another one. And I think it's just really brilliant to make it very concrete. So I thought that we would dive into a couple of the chapters to give a concrete idea of what you are talking about. So I thought I'd pick one chapter or milestone from the beginning and then one from the middle. So I thought I'd pick chapter two, milestone two. How do I get to a well-managed classroom without a lot of management? So essentially, it's classroom management, right? That's absolutely something we want our newer teachers to handle early on. And you have this checklist. So in this checklist, I'm going to give some concrete examples so listeners can understand what kinds of things. So for example, I know every student's name and they know everyone else's name, right? So check that off or don't. I see students following directions and procedures without reminders. Third example, I don't need to raise my voice or repeat myself to get students to follow procedures. So you get the idea. So I love this very concrete list that not only lets you know, should I dive into this chapter, but also gives you an idea of what will be in the chapter. So can you give an overall idea of this milestone, running a well-managed class, and also share some of the concrete strategies you have in the book?
The reason management is one of the earlier chapters, and I encourage teachers to do that checklist because if they're struggling with that and they can't check stuff off, no shame. First of all, no shame. I want new teachers to know you're not alone in this, right? So many of us struggle with this, but if you're struggling with that, that's the goal to focus on,
Yes.
right? We cannot get good at everything all at once. But if I tell new teachers, honestly, if you were to just get to say the first 3 or 4 milestones in this book,
Yeah.
including which are essentially, find ways to protect your well-being
Yes.
and then get to a well-managed classroom without a lot of top-down management,
Yes.
build relationships too, you're going to have a great year.
Yeah.
The rest I could almost hold off, but you really will have a good year. But so many new teachers rush this. They
Yes.
know it's important, but they're panicked about the pacing guide. They know so and so down the hall is already halfway through unit two, and they're like, I don't have time. I don't have
Yeah.
time to practice routines and procedures. And
Exactly.
then all year they're trying to play catch up. And so this strategy, this milestone or this goal comes early in the book to help teachers really honor that take as much time as you need to get this in place because it doesn't matter how beautiful your lesson is. If you are spending your whole class sort of redirecting students,
Right.
you're not going to get anywhere. You're just
You
going to
won't
feel
get
awful.
to it. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And students are going to suffer.
Yeah.
So legitimate goal. And then a lot of the strategies in here are, by the way, every strategy in the book is titled as a question that comes from real teachers I've worked with.
Oh, wow.
Um, Yeah. So, and I like the questions because also I think it does remind new teachers like you're not alone. Tons of other new teachers have this same question.
Yeah.
And so they can look at this and get an answer to what they're struggling with. So, one might be just that one about getting, for instance, procedures in place.
Yeah.
What do I do? And it's okay if you have to go back to that strategy. It's not, you can. I love pretending things are really intentional, even when they're a little arbitrary. Like sometimes I'll say, like, every year at the end of September, we do a revisit of our routines. Every year I do that. Of course, you're just making it up as you go, but you make it sound intentional. But they there are strategies in there on how to get routines in place, even if you're revisiting this a few months into the year.
Yeah.
And I was in a classroom with very young students, and the new teacher was saying, I need you all to behave. And this boy goes, I'm being have. No idea. Like, what do you mean,
What do you
behave? I don't
mean?
know what that looks like. And
Yes.
so we say things and we think, but I covered it. I told you what it looks like to behave.
Yeah.
But even older students, they need to be told exactly what that looks like. How are we setting them up for success? And so
Can I
there's,
share something about that?
yeah,
So earlier you talked about some of your own faux pas from early teaching, like running into the other classroom's teacher and jotting down her lesson plan from the board. And actually Berit includes some of these examples. She's very vulnerable at the beginning of the book. And so I started thinking for myself, well, what were some of the stupid mistakes or things I did? So I taught middle school. And I thought, oh, they're old enough. They know how to behave. I don't have to do anything around behavior, classroom management procedures, right? Can you imagine a middle school teacher? So you can imagine what my classroom looked like with that kind of mistake. So this chapter on this milestone about classroom management, it's for everyone. So thanks for the
for
reminder.
everyone.
Yes.
And I teach older students and still, this is going to sound crazy, but I still use visuals with them.
Yeah.
I show them exactly what it looks like, even what their notebook should look like, or what
Hmm.
setting up an assignment should look like.
Yeah.
Visuals help how to practice that routine without feeling like a drill sergeant either,
Yes.
right? Because
Yeah.
we don't want to alienate students.
Yeah.
But the fact is, if we're not yet good at something, we tend to need more practice.
Yes.
So there are strategies in there about how to practice routines and get them in place. And then also indicators like, do I have it?
Yeah.
Right? Is it working? Because that can be hard to tell.
Right.
So definitely in there about how to get routines in place. Um, there are also strategies about how do I get students to do the right thing without repeating myself or raising my voice?
Hmm.
Because again, I'm not a yeller, and frankly, it's a miserable day if I'm just sort of over and over. I get frustrated with kids. They sense we're frustrated. They don't like it either.
Nope.
And so there are methods in here and little tips. By the way, not every strategy, but a lot of them, if they're kind of long, I often have a little at a glance feature.
Yeah.
This is sort of like, on Twitter where it'll say TLDR, too long didn't read.
Yeah.
I mean, a teacher can just quickly glance at this as kids are walking in. And things like, first of all, you got to check your own emotional regulation, right?
Mhm.
If you are calm and steady, you're much more likely to have students be compliant. Once you are ratcheting it up, your chance of compliance lessens. If you hover over a student, it's
Yeah.
actually less chance of them being compliant.
Right.
And the more words we say, the
Yeah.
less chance.
Yeah.
So, how do we use fewer words?
Yeah.
How do we show some good faith and just trust it and walk away?
Yeah.
Um, and
And
even
just to
think,
reiterate again that
yeah,
you've got a video. One of your videos you use with, you demonstrating with students. You use very few words and you don't hover and you walk away. And a picture is worth, 1,000 words. So it's wonderful for, show this to a teacher, a new teacher you're working with. I don't know, how long is the clip? A minute or two, very
right.
useful. Yeah.
And there's even an example in the book too of a picture of a take a minute card, even silent management. Because again, I'm going to get into a power struggle if I get into it with that kid versus a take a minute card, which essentially says, you're not adhering to class expectations. If you change your behavior, I'll just take this back at the end of class, clean slate. If you don't, there will be a consequence, and I'll tell you at the end of class, no power struggle in class. You get to keep focusing on teaching. So there's lots of little moves like that that can
Can I
help.
jump in there?
Yeah.
So first of all, some of the strategies are very concrete, very much like a teach like a champion, that level of specificity. And sometimes the individual strategies are so good and so specific, it's worth the book just for that. So you had two strategies in this chapter that I thought if I just knew that one thing, if I didn't remember anything else from your book, it's just so one of them I had never used. I hadn't heard of this take a card, and you show in the book the actual physical card. So let's say a student is not on task, right? And then I wrote down, you hand a student the card, and the card says, take a minute. Please change what you're doing so you follow our class expectations. If you self-correct for the rest of class, I'll simply collect the card and it's a fresh start. If you continue the behavior, there will be a consequence. I will let you know the consequence at the end of class. So imagine that one little tip of sharing that card with your teachers, how much that could change. I loved that. I love another one that's very concrete. Rather than just saying, "Oh, don't have a lot of rules," right? You know, kids can't remember a lot of rules. You give an example. Give one rule, because I always thought, well, which rule would it be? You know, and here you give an example, which I do wish I had had. One rule for your classroom. You can do what you want if it doesn't create a problem for you or for others. Just
Right.
the phrasing of that, brilliant. Yeah.
And so, it gives them something to try because, again, new teachers, they come in, but frankly, they're stressed. When I am tired and stressed, it's like when I'm driving. I live in New Jersey. When I'm driving, I like to think of myself as a very kind, patient person. When I am tired and stressed and I'm late for something, I become like a New Jersey driver. I'm sort of like not my nicest self. And so I think of this for new teachers when they're tired and stressed. It might sound oversimplified, like here's a picture of a take a minute card. There's even scripts of what to say.
Yeah.
Because again, if I'm stressed out, I almost need that language. Like tell me exactly what to say
Yes.
when I get an angry email from a parent and I
Exactly.
want to diffuse that conflict. Tell me exactly what to say to avoid getting into a power struggle with a student. Um, so I do keep it really, really practical.
Yes.
And I find new teachers are hungry for that
Yeah.
because when they're stressed, it's like they need
Right.
something that tangible.
Yeah, and if you've ever been an administrator, I've made this mistake where you go into a classroom of a new teacher or any teacher, frankly, and your feedback to them is they need to improve their classroom management. You know, that's like telling a student who's written a paper, you need to write better. What does that mean, right? You know, one actionable suggestion. So, as a leader, you could use this. Let's say you have a teacher who is struggling with classroom management. You could review this yourself and then use it to give the teacher a concrete, actionable next step rather than just improve your classroom management.
Right. And also it's just what we do for students, right? Like
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
don't want you to feel judged. I don't want you to feel like you're bad at something. I want to say, hey, here's something. I know you know too, like we can work on and here's something concrete to try. If that
Absolutely.
doesn't try, I'm going to give you something else. But it's such a warmer approach and it is going to keep new teachers feeling like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm supported here
Yeah,
as
and
a
there's still something to try. There's still something in the
yes.
toolbox. I'm going to move us to the next one just to keep an eye on time. So, in the middle of the book, I chose the milestone, which I think is chapter 6. How do I increase student independence? So, right, so you've got classroom management a little bit more under control, and now you really don't want students asking you a million questions and interrupting the lesson, right? So, how do we get our students to be more independent? And some of the items on the checklist for new teachers to ask themselves whether they have mastered is, for example, I see students solving problems on their own more. I track students' stamina and it's going up bit by bit. The whole class is able to work on their own for at least the number of minutes equal to their age, right? So 10-year-olds can work on their own for at least 10 minutes. So, can you give a brief overview of this milestone of increasing student independence and perhaps just a couple of quick strategies?
I gotta say, this is my favorite goal to work on with teachers, and I get to do this in schools all the time because it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah.
When you can send students off to try things, even if they're not yet good at that skill, but they're willing to try, two things happen. One is teachers are like, oh, I like my job so much better,
Yeah.
right? I am not on all class. And two, they're going to like it because they're going to see so much more growth among their students.
Yeah.
But what doesn't happen is I can say, all right, everyone, off you go and read or write or work on math. And I'm going to get resistance. I'm going to get all the hands are going up. I'm going to get kids who are, I'll go to the bathroom, or even more obvious, head down on the desk. I'm done. I hear this very quickly. I'm done. And you know what I used to say? I used to say to writers who'd say, they'd write one sentence, they'd say, I'm done. And I'd say, oh, a writer's never done. And you know what they do? They go, like
Right.
that
What does
got
that
no
mean?
one
What does
writing.
that mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. What do I do? And so again, but when you get strategies to get them to do more, it's how we get good at anything, right? None of us learn to walk or ride a bike or anything without a lot of practice.
Yep.
And so when they get this goal going, and the other beautiful part of it, and it's why it's in the middle of the book,
Mhm.
because if you don't have management in place, this is hard to get to. You can't be like playing whack-a-mole, putting out fires of management. But when you get them to start trying and working on their own,
Mhm.
my rule of thumb is usually I need them to be able to do this for at least 10 minutes, like the whole class, not just pockets, but I need my whole class. And when I'm working on this with teachers, it's possible. It is, I have teachers get students working on their own. I worked with a first grade teacher last year. She had students, almost all ELL, they were all reading below grade level. And we knew in order for them to get better as readers, they had to read more, first of all. And she used the independent stamina chart, which was on page 196. And this actually isn't her example, but what happened
You
was
want to hold
we
it up closer so people can
yeah.
see? Yeah.
So here's an example,
Hold it up
but
a little. Yeah.
I could show and tracking with the whole class how long and making it like an exciting goal. All right, everyone, I'm going to start the timer once everybody's got their books out.
Yep.
Okay, I'm start. How long do we think we can go? We did 2 minutes yesterday. Can we double that today? Can we get to five by Friday?
Yeah.
And as soon as they started chatting or getting off task, that was fine. Timer was off. She would put 2 minutes on the chart. That's fine. Again, we're going to set the timer again. We're going to do, and they say, okay, put 4 minutes. No, no, no. It's only as long as we can all go at once. And so I have a lot of tips for how to build that stamina.
Yep.
But then the beautiful thing is, once they're able to focus on their own, now you can get to really high impact instruction, which is I'm going to go redo my lesson with my ELL students.
Yeah.
I'm going to go do a one-on-one conference over here. I can give tailored feedback on the spot when it really helps everyone grow, no matter what level they're at. So there are strategies in there like the independent stamina chart. There are moves, I mean, really practical moves, and I model it in the video, but even giving new teachers almost permission, because I think sometimes it makes us feel good when we're sort of rescuing students, like everyone's hand is up and I'm running around and I'm answering everybody. But we're also kind of enabling them. It's like this codependency, so that the minute they hit a moment of doubt, their hand goes up and they stop. But what I coach into are a lot of moves to help them work through moments of doubt. And I mean, this one is so little, but even as short as I send them off at the end of a lesson with a volume goal. It's never just off you go. It's always how much do you think you can get done in the next X number of minutes? Or drag your hand down the paper, put an X where you think you can get to in the next 5 minutes. Um, and then I'm not making eye contact in that first instance because if I do, it's almost inviting their hand to go up. So instead, I say, you have to try something before I can come to you.
Yeah.
I might have a schedule of students I'm working with. I'll come to you after I talk to them. And then a lot of ways to also give them scaffolds. So everyone has an entry point,
Yeah.
right? How do I give them tools? How do I give them resources and prioritize just this ability to build up that muscle? Because for a lot of kids, it's atrophied, that ability to like go off and try and do for a while.
So I think people can hear you're full of very concrete strategies. They're in the book. I appreciated all of those very concrete ways, that you are coaching teachers to get students to be more independent, which is what we need. And certainly with this age of AI, right? We're going to need more students to work on their own, and they will be able to, so we can work with other students at all levels. So I just want to end with sort of like a lightning quick round. Since I find it useful to synthesize and summarize, I was hoping you could help provide a few main ideas so the audience can remember and have something concrete to take away. So if you could share one main idea of the book, one main high leverage action that leaders can take, and one resource, we will end with those three quick tips in any order.
So, one main idea is really giving teachers practical, short and sweet moves because, again, nobody's really reading cover to cover anymore. So just something quick and actionable. It's like I wouldn't tell someone who doesn't know how to tie their shoes, like just tie your shoes. We break it down for them. And so send them a strategy. It doesn't have to be from this book, but give them a quick, actionable move, not a book or something long. The quick, actionable, sorry, Jen, you said a high leverage action. I'm going to share a strategy that could work great for administrators.
Okay.
And it's also one, though, that new teachers can use when they're dealing with a student who's getting upset and you want to defuse conflict. And I thought administrators might be able to use this one when they're dealing with an upset parent
Mm.
or an upset teacher or maybe even an upset student. Because what's really hard when we're dealing with those conversations is just first of all getting into problem solving mode. And we can feel defensive. We can feel like, what do you mean I didn't do X, right? And so there's a strategy in the book, and it comes from a great from Marshall Rosenberg, who wrote about nonviolent communication. And essentially, what he says is that we often, in moments of conflict, we're more like a jackal. And he said jackals are animals that kind of snarl and they nip and they're unpleasant. And if we can be a giraffe, we very often get the conflict to just, it's like all the hot air goes out of the situation. And he said giraffes are animals with these long necks. They're able to look over a situation and they have these big ears and they listen. So this is going to sound simple, but honestly, again, when I'm tired and stressed, I'm not good at this one.
Mm.
But is to be a giraffe. The next time you have an upset teacher or an angry parent, the move is this. You listen, you try to see the situation from their vantage point, you listen, and you try to name what they're feeling. It doesn't mean you give them what they want.
Mm.
It simply means you name what they're feeling. So it might look like with a student, students crying over a broken crayon. And if I am not being a giraffe, I would say, just use it. It still works. It's fine. Just keep trying. But if I were a giraffe, I'd say, I get it. It's harder to hold and it doesn't draw the same way.
Mm.
And I use that anecdote to say it's so simple, but naming what that very frustrated kid was feeling, he just, yeah, exactly. And then he kept drawing. And so if we can name it, it very often gets them to listen. Later, I can come in too with, and here's what I need you to do. I'm still holding them accountable.
Yeah.
I'm not, a doormat in it. But I encourage administrators to try that move of listening, naming what they're feeling. And you say, did I get that right? And if they say, yeah, and you know what else? They're not done yet. They just need to keep going for a bit. And you
So
say,
be a
okay,
giraffe.
yes.
Beautiful.
So be a giraffe, try that one. And then, of course, resources. I have such respect for administrators who listen to your podcast and subscribe to your beautiful resources. And I really know I don't really worry about them and their teachers. They're the kind of administrators who care. They are really going the extra mile. I really want to give them a resource so they can email me directly. All of the strategies that I just mentioned today, I'm going to create a PDF for you that shows those strategies, that gives those scripts, that shows you the take a minute card, for instance. And you can download those at my website or you can email me. So my website is www.beritgordon, BeritGordon.com. And you can go to the resources page and you'll see one there for main idea listeners. That has a passcode, and that passcode is just main idea, all one word, all lowercase, main idea, and you can download it. Or if it's easier, just email me. My email is just my name. It's Berit, Berit, at beritgordon.com. And I'm happy to share that and also send any other tips that maybe your new teachers are struggling with.
Well, thank you. That's very generous of you to spend more time summarizing a resource for our listeners. So thank you. That's very kind of you. I'll put all that information in the show notes. And then I just want to end and thank you for the kind words you said about the main idea. I appreciate it. I work hard and it's always nice to hear the impact. But I'm going to end with an inspirational quote from your book at the very beginning. And it is at the bottom of page 2. But what happens when we give new teachers proven strategies to manage their time in a class, connect with others who love teaching, get students to respect one another, plan well, and engage every learner, those new teachers are energized. They get to more and more of those days when they can say, I taught today, which is what you started with. So thank you for all the good work you're doing to support and help us retain those new teachers. And thanks again for your time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here.